The small airfield in Normandy was calm that morning, but something unusual was happening. Reporters, soldiers, tourists, and volunteers all kept looking toward the gate, waiting for someone important. No one knew exactly what to expect. They only knew that a very old World War II veteran was coming for a special event. But the organizers had not shared his age, his name, or what he planned to do. They wanted the moment to speak for itself. At 8:15 a.m., a black van slowly entered through the gate. Everyone turned toward it. The air felt heavier, as if time slowed down. Some whispered, some held up their phones, and some simply stared at the van with silent respect. The door opened, and a man stepped out slowly, carefully. As if every movement carried a lifetime of weight, he was small and thin, but his posture was proud. His white hair shone in the morning sun, and deep lines covered his face like maps of old battles. His eyes were tired, but they held something powerful, something that made even the soldiers straighten and stand still. This was 97-year-old James Jim Walters, one of the last surviving paratroopers of D-Day. But no one knew his name yet. To the crowd, he was simply the old man with the determined eyes. Jim stepped out of the van using a wooden cane. A young soldier rushed to help him, but Jim gently shook his head. "I got it, son," he said with a small smile. His voice was soft, but it carried confidence. The soldier backed away respectfully. Every camera turned toward Jim, but he didn't smile for pictures. He didn't wave. He looked straight ahead at the small airfield where a plane waited for him with its engines off. He stared at it with the same seriousness a soldier gives a battlefield. A reporter finally stepped forward. "Sir, people say you have come for a very special reason. May we ask, why today?" Jim didn't answer at first. Instead, he looked up at the sky blue, clear, peaceful. So different from the sky he saw 75 years ago. Then he spoke for simple words. "It's time to return." The reporter looked confused. "Return where, sir?" Jim tapped the paratrooper badge pinned on his jacket. It was old, faded, and scratched, but he touched it gently, like a precious memory. "Where it all began," he said quietly. The crowd around him grew silent. Some realized what was happening. Others didn't. But everyone felt the tension in Jim's voice, the weight of something unfinished. Jim's granddaughter, Emily, walked beside him. She held his arm not to support him, but to guide him. She was in her late 20s, wearing a windbreaker and a backpack. Her eyes were red, as if she had cried earlier. "Grandpa, are you sure about this?" she whispered. Jim didn't look at her. "I've been sure for 75 years. Emily swallowed hard. She had heard the story many times, but today it felt different. Today, the story wasn't just a memory. It was becoming real. Jim took slow steps toward the airfield. The sun warmed his face, and the sound of the wind reminded him of the night before Didatha, the sound of engines. Shouting officers and young men trying to hide their fear. He had not been back to Omaha Beach since that day. He said it was too painful. He said he was not ready, but last year, on his 96th birthday, he told Emily, "Maybe I don't have many years left, but I have one promise left." And a promise is something a soldier keeps. Emily knew better than to question a promise like that. A military officer approached Jim and saluted him. Jim returned a small, slow salute, but it was strong, filled with respect. "Sir," the officer said, "the plane is ready whenever you are." Jim nodded but did not move. Instead, he looked around at the crowd. Many held flowers. Some wore shirts with pictures of family members who fought in the war. Others held tiny American flags. He whispered softly, "So many didn't make it home." Emily heard him, "But you did, and they would be proud of you." Jim didn't answer. He was staring at a little boy in a red shirt holding a small American flag. The boy looked at Jim with wide, innocent eyes. "Are you a real soldier?" the boy asked. Jim smiled. "I used to be." The boy tilted his head. "You look old." The crowd laughed softly, but Jim just nodded. Double quotes, "Yes, I'm old. Older than most people get to be. And today, I'm doing something even young men think twice about." The boy's eyes widened. "Like what?" Jim leaned down a little. "Jumping out of a plane." The boy gasped. "But you're old." Jim laughed a slow, shaky laugh that made the crowd smile. "I know. That's why it's going to be interesting." The boy ran back to his parents, shouting, "Mom, the old man is going to jump from the sky." The crowd chuckled, but then the atmosphere returned to silence. Everyone felt the seriousness behind Jim's humor. Emily touched Jim's arm. "Grandpa, the more you talk, the more nervous I get."
Ow.
Jim shook his head. "Don't be nervous for me. Be proud of me. That's all I want today." He continued walking toward the plane. The closer he got, the slower Jim walked, but not because he was weak. It was because every step brought back memories he had tried to bury for decades. As he approached the plane, the pilot stepped out. He was a tall man with a strong handshake, Mr. Walters. "It's a huge honor," the pilot said. Jim looked at him carefully. "You ever flown over Omaha Beach?" "Never," the pilot replied. Jim nodded. "Then today, you'll see what I saw." But without the bullets, the pilot smiled respectfully. "We'll take good care of you, sir." Jim looked at the open door of the plane. It was small, metal, cold, just like the planes of 1944. He reached out and touched the edge of the door. The metal felt familiar. "Too familiar," Emily whispered. "Are you okay?" Jim finally answered, "I'm back, and I'm ready." He took a deep breath. The engine started. The wind picked up. The crowd watched in complete silence. The old paratrooper was home again, and his journey was just beginning. The engines roared above the English Channel, drowning every other sound inside the dark military aircraft. 20 young paratroopers sat along the metal benches, each wearing heavy gear, each breathing fast. Among them was 22-year-old Private James Jim Walters, his hands gripping his parachute strap so tightly that his knuckles turned white. No one spoke. No one joked. The time for jokes had ended the moment they stepped onto the C-47. Now, every man sat with the same thought. Will I survive the jump? The red interior lights flickered, casting long shadows on the soldiers' faces. Sweat mixed with fear, and the smell of gun oil filled the air. Outside, the sky was pitch black. It was the night of June 6, 1944, a night that would change the course of history. Jim kept his eyes straight, just trying to stay calm. But his heart beat fast. Across from him sat his closest friend, Henry Brooks. Henry was tall, freckled, and always smiling, except today. Even Henry looked scared now. He leaned forward. "You okay, Jimmy?" Henry whispered. Jim nodded but didn't open his mouth. His voice felt stuck in his chest. Henry forced a shaky grin. "Hey, don't forget our promise."
Ow!
Jim slowly looked up. "I could never forget your promise." The same one that lived inside Jim for 75 years. The same promise that brought him back to Omaha Beach as an old man. Henry placed a hand on Jim's shoulder. "If one of us makes it, he comes back here someday. You hear me?" "I hear you," Jim replied. "And if both of us make it, we come back together." Jim closed his eyes for a moment. He didn't know then which version of the promise he would carry for the rest of his life. Suddenly, the plane rattled violently. Flak bursts exploded, outside bright flashes lighting the sky like lightning. The soldiers ducked instinctively. "Hold on, boys." The pilot shouted from the cockpit. The plane dropped sharply. Someone cursed. Someone else prayed. Jim's heart felt like it was going to burst. A soldier near the door vomited on the floor. Nobody laughed. They were too scared to judge. Henry leaned in again. "Jimmy, listen. Whatever happens, you're not alone, okay?" Jim nodded. "You too." Another explosion shook the aircraft. The lights flickered again, leaving the men in near darkness. Then the jumpmaster shouted, 10 minutes. Every paratrooper adjusted his gear. Fingers shook. Breathing grew fast and loud. Jim tried to steady himself. He thought of home, his mother baking bread, his father fixing tools in the garage. He wondered if he would ever see them again. Henry tightened his straps with clumsy hands. "Hey," he whispered. "If I don't make it," Jim cut him off. "Don't say it." "But if I don't?" "Don't say it." "But if I don't?" "Henry, shut up," Jim said, his voice breaking. "You're making it. We both are." Henry swallowed hard and nodded. Jim looked around the plane. Every soldier was barely older than a teenager. Their lives had only just begun. But war didn't care about age. War didn't care about dreams. War only cared about taking them. The plane door slid open with a violent sound. Cold wind punched into the aircraft. The red light above the door glowed. Not yet. The soldiers stood, forming a line. Jim felt his legs shaking, but he locked his knees. He had no choice. No one had a choice. The jumpmaster screamed over the wind, "Check equipment!" Jim slapped Henry's back, checking straps. Henry did the same. Their eyes met, fear and courage fighting inside both men. 1 minute. The jumpmaster yelled. Jim's stomach twisted. Outside he could see small orange flashes on the ground tracers, machine guns, explosions. The whole coast was on fire. It looked like hell. Henry's face went pale. "Jimmy, this doesn't look good. It's too late to back out," Jim whispered. "Go, go, go." The green light had not turned on yet, but the plane was under heavy fire. They couldn't wait. The first man jumped. Then the second. Then the third. Henry stepped forward. Jim grabbed his arm. "Henry." Henry smiled, a small, scared, brave smile. "If I go first, you'd better land close." Jim tried to smile back. "I'll be right behind you." Henry shouted over the wind, "Don't forget our promise." Then he jumped into the night. Jim's heart felt like it cracked. He took one deep breath. The wind roared past his ears. The sky looked endless and black. The green light finally blinked on. "Go," the jumpmaster yelled, pushing the next soldier. Jim stepped to the door. The world outside was chaos tracers, shooting upward, explosions lighting the sea, the wind screaming. For a moment, Jim felt frozen. Then he whispered for home. "For Henry, for all of us." And he jumped. The wind grabbed him instantly. His body spun. He couldn't see Henry. He couldn't see anything except flashes of red and orange through the clouds. Parachutes opened around him like white flowers in a burning sky. Jim pulled his chute cord. It snapped open with a violent jerk. He gasped for air. He started dropping toward the deadly. "Battlefield below!" Shouts echoed through the night. Fire lit the sky. Soldiers drifted down like shadows. Some chutes burned. Some fell too fast. Some never had the chance to open at all. Gunfire cracked beneath him. Jim's boots hit the ground hard. He rolled, breathing fast, adrenaline rushing through him. The sand was cold and wet. Bullets snapped past his ears. He ripped his chute off and crawled behind a chunk of metal. "Henry," he whispered loudly. "Henry, where are you?" No answer. Only the screams of wounded men. Only the thunder of bombs. Only the sound of history. Tearing itself open, Jim pushed forward, crawling on his elbows, searching for Henry. Every explosion shook the ground. Every second felt like a lifetime. At last, Jim saw a figure lying near a broken piece of landing craft. A parachute was tangled around him. Jim's heart dropped. He crawled closer. "Henry." Henry looked up, his face pale. "Jimmy, you made it." Jim grabbed his friend's hand. "You too." Henry tried to nod, but he was bleeding. He whispered, "Keep the promise." "If I can't?" Jim felt cold inside. "You're going to make it." Henry shook his head slowly, with his last strength. Henry placed something in Jim's hand. His dog tags. Jim felt his chest break. "No, no." Henry smiled weakly. "Come back someday. For both of us." His eyes closed. The battle around them raged on, and Jim understood in that moment. This promise would follow him for the rest of his life for years after the war. Jim Walters carried the battlefield inside him. He did not speak about D-Day. He did not talk about Henry. He did not share the weight he carried. His family knew he had served, but they never knew the full truth. Jim preferred silence. Silence felt safer, but silence is heavy, and his silence lasted decades. When the war ended, Jim returned to the United States with nothing except a duffel bag, a uniform that smelled like smoke and salt, and Henry's dog tags, which he kept in his pocket every day. He never took them off his keychain. Not once at first. Jim tried to build a normal life. He worked in a small hardware store. He mowed lawns in the summer, shoveled snow in the winter. He married a school teacher named Martha, a gentlewoman who understood that some wounds cannot be seen. She never pushed him to talk. She simply stood by him, quietly and lovingly. Every night, Jim sat on the porch and stared at the stars. He wondered if Henry would approve of the man he became. He wondered if he should have jumped faster, landed closer, or done something different that night on Omaha Beach. Survivor's guilt does not fade easily. Sometimes it never fades at all. Still, Jim tried to move forward. He built a family, 2 sons and a daughter. He shared jokes, taught them how to ride bikes, fixed their toys, but he never shared the story of D-Day. Not until the night his first son turned 10 that night. Jim went to tuck his son into bed. The boy asked, "Dad, my teacher said you were a hero in the war. Is that true?" Jim froze. He didn't know how to answer. After a long moment, he said softly, "Heroes are the ones who didn't make it home." His son didn't understand, but Jim's voice shook, and that was enough for the boy to stay quiet. Years passed. Jim grew older, his back bent, his hands wrinkled. He watched his children grow up, move out, start their own lives. He became a grandfather, then a great-grandfather. Through all of it, he kept Henry's dog tags close, rubbing the metal whenever he felt the memories pressing too hard. But every June, every single year, Jim woke up from the same nightmare. The plane, the wind, the jump, the landing, and Henry's final breath. Every year on June 6th, he placed the dog tags on the table, touched them softly and whispered, "I haven't forgotten. I never will." But he still couldn't go back to France. He told himself he was too busy, too old, too tired. But the truth was far simpler. He was afraid. Not afraid of travel. Not afraid of danger. He was afraid of the memories, the sounds, the faces, the weight of the past. He feared seeing Omaha Beach again because he knew it would open every wound he had spent decades closing. But fate has a strange way of working. On his 96th birthday, his granddaughter Emily asked him what he wanted as a gift. She expected him to ask for a book, a baseball cap, or maybe a slice of chocolate cake. But Jim surprised her. "Take me to France," he said softly. Emily blinked. "France? Why France?" Jim looked at her with eyes full of memory. "I left someone there," he whispered, "and I think it's time I went back." Emily sat down slowly, her heart pounding. She knew he meant someone from the war. Someone important. Someone whose loss still lived inside him. "Grandpa," she said carefully, "are you sure you want to go back?" Jim nodded. "I made a promise to a friend. He didn't live long enough to remind me. But I remember." Emily hesitated. "What promise?" Jim reached into the drawer beside him and pulled out the old dog tags. The metal was worn smooth from years of being held, touched, and carried. "These were Henry's," Jim said. "He was my closest friend. We jumped together on D-Day, and we made a promise. If one of us survived, he would return one day. Not as a soldier, but as a man who remembers." Emily stared at the dog tags. Suddenly, the old stories her grandfather never told made sense. "Grandpa, that's beautiful," she whispered. Jim shook his head. "It's not beautiful, Emily. It's heavy. Heavy like the sea that night. Heavy like the fear we carried. Heavy like the silence I've lived with for 75 years. Emily placed her hand over his. "Then let's lift that weight together." For the first time in decades, Jim smiled a soft, relieved smile. But the journey wouldn't be simple. Doctors warned him the trip might be dangerous at his age. His heart was weak. His legs were unstable. Even a small fall could break a bone. His family argued about it for weeks. His oldest son said, "Dad, you're too old to travel." His daughter said you could get hurt. "Please stay home," his grandson said. "There will be thousands of people at the anniversary. You don't need to go." But Jim listened quietly, then answered each of them the same way. "A man who can live with regret is a lucky man. I am not that man." He looked at his family, the people he loved most, and added, "I don't want to die with a promise still in my pocket." Silence fell. That was the moment everyone understood. This was not a simple trip. This was not nostalgia. This was not a tourist visit. This was closure. This was not a tourist visit. This was closure. Jim's family agreed. Emily booked the flights. She arranged the hotel. She contacted the organizers of the DDI 75th anniversary. When she mentioned Jim's history, the officials were stunned. A surviving paratrooper? At 97? And he wants to return? Emily nodded. He wants more than that. What else? The official asked. Emily hesitated, then said the words that would change everything. He wants to jump again. The line went silent. Then the official spoke softly. "If he's willing, we will make it happen." Emily looked at her grandfather later that night. "Grandpa," she said, "they're going to let you jump." Jim closed his eyes, his heart full. "That's good," he whispered. Henry would have liked that. From that moment on, Jim was not afraid anymore. He was ready. Ready to face the memories. Ready to return to Omaha Beach. Ready to finish the story he left behind. Ready to keep the promise. After 75 long years, the storm of 1944 was calling him back. The plane stood on the runway. It's like a metal giant waiting to wake up. Its silver body shined under the early morning sun, and the sound of cameras clicking filled the air. Veterans, soldiers, and families gathered around. Whispering as the 97-year-old paratrooper approached, Jim Walters walked slowly but confidently. His steps were small, careful, but steady. Emily stayed close, watching every move he made. She carried Henry's dog tags in her pocket because Jim said he didn't want to lose them before the jump. "Grandpa, last chance to back out," she said gently. Jim smiled. "I didn't come this far to watch from the ground." As he reached the staircase leading into the aircraft, 2 young soldiers stood straight and saluted him. Jim paused, saluted back, and then began climbing the steps. Each step felt heavier than the last, not because of age, but because of memory. Inside the plane, the air was cool and quiet. The pilot shook Jim's hand firmly. "Sir, it's an honor," he said. Jim nodded. "Let's make this one smooth. I don't bounce as well as I used to." The pilot laughed respectfully. "We'll take good care of you." Jim moved toward the seat near the open jump door. The metal frame was cold under his hand, cold like the plane from 1944. A shiver ran through him. Well, not from fear, but from recognition. Emily helped adjust his harness. "Grandpa, your heart okay?" Jim took a deep breath. "My heart's been waiting for this." The engine started humming. Jim closed his eyes, letting the vibration roll through his bones. It felt like being 22, again scared, brave, and ready. The plane began to move. Outside, the crowd waved. Flags fluttered. Some people wiped tears. They weren't watching an old man jump. They were watching history breathe again. As the aircraft lifted into the sky, Jim looked out the small window. The land below shrank. The sea spread like a sheet of blue glass. Far ahead, the long stretch of Omaha Beach waited. Emily squeezed his hand. "You okay?" Jim nodded. "I'm thinking about Henry. Do you wish he were here?" she asked. Jim shook his head slowly. "He is here. He's always been here." The plane climbed higher into the clouds. The wind roared through the open door. The air smelled like salt and sky. Jim felt his heartbeat settle into a steady rhythm. Then the jump master approached. "Sir, we're 10 minutes out." Jim breathed deeply. 10 minutes. 10 minutes until he returned to the sky he left as a young soldier. 10 minutes until he finally completed a promise. The jump master added, "Weather is clear. Perfect conditions." Emily smiled with relief, but Jim didn't smile. Something in the wind, something in the way the plane shook, lightly made his chest tighten. "Grandpa," Emily asked, Jim didn't answer at first. He stared out the door, eyes fixed on the horizon. "What's wrong?" she whispered. Jim's voice came out low, almost trembling. "That cloud formation. The one over the beach?" Emily followed his gaze. "What about it?" Jim swallowed hard. "I've seen it before." Emily frowned. "In an old picture?" He shook his head slowly. "No." "That exact formation?" "On the night Henry died." Emily's face froze. A cold shiver crawled up her spine. The jumpmaster stepped closer. "Sir, is everything all right?" Jim didn't look away from the sky. "I don't know," he whispered, "but something's coming." The plane rattled softly just once. Emily grabbed his arm. "Grandpa, what do you mean something's coming?" Jim turned his head slightly. His eyes sharp and steady like the soldier he once was. "I don't think this jump is going to go the way we planned." Engines hummed. The light above the door flickered, and the screen fades to black. The end. Black. The end.